Here's another sample from my second collection called Thank You, My Friends, Moving Right Along. I'm Kent Sipes, and I hope you get a few laughs out of this column. I sure enjoyed reading it myself and remembering the day. So, enjoy Canoewbies. Calvin and I were new to shooting the rapids on the Guadalupe River in the Texas Hill Country. My big brother Kevin, see my column called Super Sipes, and his friend Tony, who is our church youth leader, had canoed on the river once before. At 15, I got to go along because Kev was my big brother, and he was definitely in charge on the trip. Of course, he was in charge in lots of situations because leadership is a big part of his nature. Tony and Kevin were in their early 20s, Calvin was 18, and I was the very enthusiastic kid along for the ride. We had set up camp the night before right beside the dock, truly a primo spot. Though Kevin and I had been camping lots of times, Tony had only camped once, so he decided to sleep outside the tent. He told us he had never seen a shooting star, and he was determined to see one that night, even if it meant staying awake the whole evening. After only 5 minutes of staring into the sky, he saw his first one. In fact, we all enjoyed a spectacular light show that night. Apparently there was a meteor shower, and it lasted about 10 minutes. I was thrilled to be included with my big brother and Tony, sleeping under the stars, even though the ground beneath our sleeping bags was rocky, cold, and slanted downward. I volunteered to make breakfast for the group the next morning, scrambled eggs and sausage. After a hearty breakfast, we trudged up to the campground canoe rental booth and picked up our life vests. Then we piled in a beat-up, faded blue van for the ride to the put-in point, about 4 miles upriver. After 10 minutes of basic instructions, we slid our canoes into the river and prepared to face our first white water. Kevin and Tony went first to demonstrate rowing in tandem to navigate the first tame rapids safely, and they promptly turned over. Then they watched, disbelieving as Calvin and I ignorantly let the current turn us 180 degrees, and we went through backward without a hitch, laughing nervously the whole time. We decided they must have exaggerated the difficulty of rowing through rapids, and we raised our paddles over our heads in victory. About 10 minutes later, we figured out that our canoe was different from theirs. Their seats were flush with the top of the canoe, while ours were set about 6 inches lower, and the lower center of gravity was our secret to success. The next rapids were much tougher than the first set, with narrow passes between huge boulders. Calvin and I tried to row in a coordinated fashion, but we weren't very good at it. We flipped over right away and were immediately swimming for our lives. Fortunately, everyone had prepared for the canoes to flip. Our towels, sunscreen, and snacks were tied in plastic grocery bags. But this turned out to only keep water in the bags, preventing their contents from drying out. Besides not drowning as I careened off the huge rocks, I was most concerned with reaching the bag containing my towel and beef jerky. At first, I was a bit cautious about continuing to eat jerky dipped in river water, but I reasoned that I was ingesting large amounts of brown water anyway. Within 30 minutes, I was dropping it to the floor of the canoe in between ripping off chunks with my teeth. I had decided to let my immune system protect me from whatever might be in the water. And I knew there was lots of foreign matter floating in that river because I had put some of it there. Just that morning, Kev had pointed out to me that the folks swimming near the dock probably didn't appreciate me scrubbing the breakfast pans and dumping the greasy egg remains into the water 3 feet from them. I'd like to repeat the trip with our sons, son-in-laws, etc., maybe this summer. I'm not sure I can convince my stepson Ben to join us. He went to the Guadalupe with me and a neighbor kid when he was 14, just before I married his mom, and it was not a fun experience for anybody. We went in August, and I should have remembered the water level is very low by that time of year. That meant no rapids and large sections of the river over which we had to portage, which means dragging or carrying our canoes. It was also very hot, and Scooter, the other kid, had never been camping, so he had no idea what the vents in the tent were for. He decided he should close them before bedding down the first night, and I awakened at 1 a.m., feeling as if I were trying to nap in a sauna. I could hear the wind howling outside the tent, but absolutely no air was moving inside. After reopening the vent flaps, I was able to get 2 or 3 hours of sleep. Perfect preparation for 4 miles of dragging a canoe over wood and rocks. So maybe I'll bring my son-in-law Josh. He and I both like to cook, and he's a lot of fun. Kevin and Tony are retired, and they're occasionally in charge with Calvin, who's still working. Kevin might bring one or both of his sons, and Tony can bring a son-in-law or two. I don't know who Calvin might bring, but having him there would certainly bring back some of the fun we had way back when, more than 40 years ago. We may even try to recreate some scenes from the first trip that I captured with my little 126 camera, like Tony sitting in a half-submerged canoe with a goofy grin on his face, or Kevin doing his best Tarzan rope swing right into Calvin, who does a pretty good stunt version of being knocked from the canoe, or me scrubbing breakfast pans, but not in the river, at least not if anybody's swimming nearby.